In this video we will have a look at the IPv6 stateless address auto configuration. In this lab we will have two routers connected to each other, and we will first configure now R1 with a static IPv6 address on the Ethernet interface. First of all, we need to activate IPv6 globally, and then we go into the interface, configure IPv6 or enable IPv6 on the interface, and configure an IPv6 address, which is in this case 2001 face 164, and that is it for the moment on R1. Now let's move to R2. So also here on R2 we will activate IPv6 globally, then jump into the Ethernet interface, activate IPv6 on the interface itself. Now we configure this interface to allocate the IPv6 address based on SLAAC. This is done with IPv6 address auto global. So the interface is coming up now, but when we check out, we see that there is not yet an IPv6 address allocated. It's just the link local IP address, but not the global IP address. The reason for that is that the Huawei routers do not send out any router advertisements per default, so we need to move back to R1 to activate the router advertisements. To activate the router advertisements on R1, we configure the command undo IPv6 neighbor discovery router advertisements halt, and now R1 is sending out router advertisements. And let's now move back to R2 to see if R2 has now an IPv6 address from that prefix. Now we are back on R2. Before we just had the link local IPv6 address. Let's check out if we also have now an IPv6 global IP address. This can be checked with display IPv6 interface brief. And here we can see that we have one. This is generated with SLAAC with stateless address auto configuration. And based on the IPv6 address, we also see that this is a special format. So let's go deeper into that one. The first 64 bits, it's the prefix, which is coming from the router advertisements from R1. And the second half, the second 64 bits are generated by the router itself. This part is generated with the EUI64 standard, which means it takes his own MAC address. Let's check that out. Display interface G003. Here we can see the hardware address, the MAC address of this interface. When we now split this MAC address in the middle and insert FFFE, and we flip the 7th bit, then we come to the 64 bits of the interface ID here on the top. We can now also check the connectivity between these two routers. So let's make a ping. It's done ping IPv6 and then the IPv6 address of router R1. And as we can see, we have the connectivity between R2 and R1